In the dark corners of the galaxy, where empires rose and fell like waves against a shore, there was a whisper carried through alien barracks and command halls, a whisper that refused to die, though no one wanted to admit they had spoken it. The words were simple, fragile, almost laughable, yet they spread like fire through armies made of steel and blood. Humans are only flesh. Then why do warriors tremble? It made no sense, not to the soldiers bred for conquest, not to the generals who had shattered worlds with a single command, not to the warlords who towered over their enemies with armored scales and weapons that could vaporize a city in seconds. Humans were small, weak, unarmored, their skins soft, their bodies fragile, their weapons primitive, compared to the machines of the great empires, and yet when their names were spoken, a strange silence often followed across campfires and war councils. Alien soldiers shifted uneasily, eyes darting to shadows as if the very thought of humans could summon something unseen. The commanders told themselves it was nonsense, superstition spread by cowards, but still, they noticed the change. Warriors who once crushed foes without thought now hesitated when assigned to human sectors. Patrols returned, tense, jumpy, sometimes refusing to re-enter battlefields where humans had fought. The reports were strange, inconsistent, contradictory. One spoke of human soldiers fighting long after their bodies should have failed, wounds that should have dropped them to the ground did not stop them from advancing. Another claimed that even when outnumbered 10-1, humans refused to retreat, their eyes burning with something no weapon could extinguish. Some officers dismissed these stories as exaggerations, yet others remembered the truth too clearly. They had seen it once long ago during first contact. The humans had been underestimated, dismissed as animals, pretending to be soldiers. The alien fleet had expected an easy victory, but what they found was something they could not explain the first time an alien warrior faced a human. He laughed at the small figure before him, weak, thin, and shaking from exhaustion, but then the human charged not away, but forward, his body already bleeding his hand, gripping a weapon that had no chance against advanced armor. Yet he struck with such fury, such will, that even when cut down, his scream echoed across the field and made other humans rise louder, fiercer, stronger. The aliens could kill them. Yes, their weapons shredded flesh, their machines broke bone, but what terrified them was not how easily humans died. It was how willingly they faced death, with eyes unbroken and voices still shouting, "Fight." It haunted the warriors long after the battle ended. In victory, their dreams carried the sight of fragile beings charging through fire and pain without fear and without surrender. The generals held secret meetings trying to explain it. They said humans were reckless, irrational, driven by desperation. Yet inside, they wondered if it was something else. Something deeper than tactics or courage, perhaps a force they did not possess themselves now. Years later, as the war spread across the stars, more soldiers began to feel the same dread. Patrols who had never faced humans still spoke of them in hushed tones. The young recruits laughed at first, but the older ones, the ones who had fought in human wars, remained quiet. Their silence was the loudest warning in every camp, hallways filled with whispers. In every battle preparation, weapons clutched too tightly, eyes searching the darkness, waiting for a shadow to move. Some called it weakness, others called it survival. But in truth, no one could answer the question if humans were only flesh. Then why did warriors tremble? Why did the strongest armies in the galaxy feel their hands shake? Why did nightmares of fragile bodies charging through fire linger long after victory was claimed? Something was wrong with the story of flesh, something that could not be ignored forever. The alien commanders tried to silence the rumors, but fear was a poison that spread faster than orders and discipline. They told their soldiers that humans were nothing more than animals, clever perhaps, but limited, weak. Against the strength of empires, but deep down in their hearts, they knew the words they spoke were hollow, because they too had seen the strange defiance in human eyes, and they too had wondered how fragile bodies could stand against storms of fire, without breaking. And so in the quiet corners of warships, far from the ears of superiors, the soldiers whispered to one another about the humans. Stories passed from one unit to another, distorted perhaps, but all carrying the same truth humans did. Not fight like others. They fought as if something invisible held them upright, when flesh should have failed, as if death itself could not silence them. And each story ended the same way, with the question that gnawed at every mind: if they are only flesh, then why do warriors tremble? The whispers grew until even the council of the great empires could not ignore them. And behind closed doors, debates raged. The generals argued with data and numbers, saying humans were not a true threat. Their fleets were small, their technology centuries behind their armies, scattered and undertrained. Yet others raised a point that chilled the room. It was not about technology or numbers. It was about spirit. Spirit that no weapon could measure, spirit that could turn battles upside down when all logic said they should be lost. And one elder who had lived through a dozen wars spoke words no one wanted to hear. Perhaps humans were something else, something the galaxy did not yet understand. The council laughed at him, called him superstitious. But when the meeting ended, their laughter did not last for long. Meanwhile, on Earth, the humans themselves did not know of the whispers that haunted their enemies. They only knew they were being pushed. They only knew they were small against the great war machines that blocked out their skies. But still, they stood still. They fought, and even when their cities burned and their ships shattered, they did not kneel to surrender in the ruins of one fallen city. A young soldier stood bleeding, his rifle broken, his squad gone. Yet when he saw the alien troops approach, he lifted a piece of metal and screamed a cry, not of despair but of fury. And something strange happened. The alien troops halted, not because he was strong, but because for a moment they felt something inside them twist a chill, crawling up their spines, as if the broken soldier carried an army within him before they could move. Other humans rose from the rubble, weapons shaking, hands weak, but their eyes bright with the same fire. The aliens fired their weapons, and the humans fell, but not before charging forward, closing distance, making them bleed. And though the battle ended with the city lost, the alien troops did not cheer. They looked at one another with unease and whispered the question once more. Why did their hands shake? Why did their dreams fill with faces of fragile bodies refusing to fall? When night came, the alien warriors lay in silence their victories, tasting like ash because they had seen something they could not explain, a power that did not come from weapons or numbers or strength, but from within the humans themselves. And now the fear grew larger, no longer whispers in the shadows, but an unspoken truth spreading across fleets and armies. The humans were only flesh. Yes, but there was something beyond flesh, something the galaxy feared to name, and something they knew could one day turn the balance of war. The alien fleets continued their advance across the edges of human space, their banners spread wide and their ships blotting out the stars. But the whispers of fear followed them like shadows. Soldiers who had once laughed at the idea of humans now avoided speaking their names, and commanders found discipline harder to enforce because unease had sunk its claws deep into every rank. They had expected conquest to be swift, brutal, decisive. Yet each battle brought moments that defied logic. A lone human pilot diving his crippled fighter into the heart of a dreadnought, a platoon of wounded soldiers refusing to retreat, even as fire rained down, whole villages rising with stick stones and fire against armored invaders. And though they always lost the memory of their defiance, burned itself into alien minds like scars. Meanwhile, Earth was not silent. Governments' fractured leaders argued about how to resist or whether to surrender. But among the people, something stronger was forming. A unity born not from politics, but from survival in underground bunkers, in ruined streets, in scattered colonies far from home. Humanity began to whisper back, and their whispers carried not fear, but a promise they would not break. They would not bend even if flesh turned to ash in the void of space. As stories of resistance grew, alien soldiers began to ask themselves questions. They were never supposed to ask if humans were truly weak. Then why did they keep fighting if humans had no power? Then why did even the strongest warriors dream of their faces? Why did victories feel like defeats? One general tried to crush the fear with an iron hand. He ordered that every trace of humanity's defiance be erased, that no story of their resistance should reach the ranks. Yet the more he tried to bury it, the more it spread. And his own men began to look at him with the same trembling they once reserved for humans, because fear had shifted. It was no longer about humans being weak or strong. It was about humans being something different, something unshakable. One night on a forward base at the edge of a conquered world, a group of alien soldiers sat in silence, staring at the stars. One finally spoke, his voice low and heavy. He told the others of a battle he had seen when a human mother carried her child across a burning field, chased by soldiers even when fire struck her. She did not stop until she threw her child into the arms of another who ran farther. She fell, but her eyes remained defiant. And the soldier said it was then he realized something he could never forget. He feared humans not because of what they could do, but because of what they refused to stop doing. Because even in death, they found ways to fight his. Words spread through the camp, and though no one admitted it aloud, every soldier who heard them felt the same truth, claw at their heart. Humans carried something unseen, something unmeasurable, something that made warriors tremble, and on Earth, the resistance only grew stronger. Humans built weapons out of wreckage, turned fallen ships into fortresses, and trained civilians as if they were soldiers. Every loss became fuel for the next stand. Every scar became a reason to fight harder. They were flesh, yes, but flesh that endured beyond reason, flesh that carried spirit, like a weapon. The galaxy did not understand it, but they felt it in their bones. The more battles they won, the more they feared what might come if humanity ever rose beyond survival. And so the war that was meant to end quickly became a storm where every alien soldier now looked over their shoulder, wondering not if they would win, but how long before the trembling in their own hands betrayed them. The skies above the occupied colonies burned with the glow of alien warships, their shadows stretching like claws across the ruined cities. And yet in those shadows, humanity refused to disappear. The resistance was no longer scattered or unplanned. It began to take shape like a living organism growing in the cracks. The aliens could not seal men and women who had once been farmers. Miners, teachers, and workers now moved like trained soldiers, guided by nothing but sheer will and the memory of what had been taken from them. Weapons were scarce ammunition, even scarcer. But where tools failed, determination rose stronger. And the aliens who once laughed at human frailty now found themselves whispering warnings to each other in the dead of night. They said, "Never corner a human. Never leave them desperate. Never let them see you afraid." But despite the warnings, fear spread like smoke, and it could not be contained because every battle, no matter how small, carried something more powerful than fire. It carried stories of a single human soldier standing alone at a barricade, buying time for hundreds to escape a colony where children were hidden in tunnels while their parents fought to the last breath, a pilot whose crippled ship lit the sky as it tore into an enemy cruiser. These stories spread faster than light because they were repeated again and again, even by the mouths of those who had fought against them, and the aliens did not realize it. But in trying to erase humanity, they had made them eternal. Meanwhile, within the alien High Council, debates raged in silence. They spoke in hushed tones about the strange terror rising through their armies. Discipline was weakening morale, slipping even victories tasted hollow for what? Empire could claim glory when soldiers shook at the mention of the enemy's name. One commander demanded extermination. scorch earth salt, its skies wipe every trace of human life, but another argued that such brutality would not end the fear, it would only immortalize it. And so the council turned to desperation. They sent spies, assassins, saboteurs into the human ranks to try to choke the rebellion before it grew too strong. But what they found only worsened their fear, for they discovered humanity had no central leader, no single figure to kill or remove. It was not one man or woman guiding them. It was everyone, every parent, every child, every soldier, every survivor. And this was something the council could not understand, because empires were built on chains of command and power. Humanity was building something else, something alive and unbreakable on Earth itself. Fires burned across the skies as resistance fighters struck against enemy outposts. They used tunnels, rivers, forests, and even shattered ruins as their weapons. They fought with desperation, but also with cunning. And the more the aliens tried to crush them, the more inventive they became, an army of flesh that adapted faster than machines that refused to surrender. Even when crushed, they rose again. The soldiers who fought them began to notice something terrible. When they looked into human eyes, they saw no fear, only determination. And it made their own hands tremble. One veteran admitted in secret that he would rather face 100 armored beasts than a single unarmed human staring at him with that unshakable gaze. For there was something unnatural in it, something the galaxy could not explain. The more they studied humans, the less they understood. How could fragile bodies endure such endless pain? How could minds shatter and yet rebuild stronger? How could weakness turn into a weapon more dangerous than any blade the war dragged on, and the galaxy waited to see which way the tide would turn? But in truth, something had already shifted, because even before humanity won their freedom, they had already won the fear of their enemies, and fear once born is not so easily killed. And so the question that haunted the stars was no longer whether humans would survive, but what would happen when flesh learned how to rise higher than fear itself. The alien fleet hung above Earth like an iron crown, each ship a fortress a reminder that humanity was supposed to kneel, and yet humanity did not kneel in the streets of ruined cities. Fires burned, but in the hearts of the people. Something stronger burned, a will that would not die. The aliens had believed they were fighting bodies of flesh that could be broken. But what they now faced was something else. They faced an enemy who fought with the invisible weapons of memory, loyalty, and rage in the shattered ruins of what was once New York. A boy no older than 16 carried messages through tunnels, avoiding patrols where machines scanned for life. He carried not weapons but words, and those words mattered more than guns, because words became fire. Fire spread through hearts faster than bullets ever could when soldiers heard of a village that held out 3 days without food, when mothers whispered how their sons brought down armored beasts with only traps, and courage when refugees returned to fight after losing everything. The aliens saw something that machines could not measure or predict. This was the battlefield they could not control, and in this battlefield flesh became a weapon stronger than steel. In the alien High Council chambers, fear grew into silence. They studied reports, numbers, graphs, all pointing to one truth. The more they fought humanity, the stronger humanity became. Battles that should have been victories ended in retreats. Soldiers who once marched proudly now moved with hesitation. Commanders now hid their trembling hands beneath cloaks, and one elder spoke words that chilled the chamber. He said, "If flesh is this strong without empire, what will it become when empire rises of their own?" And those words clung to every mind like poison. For they all knew it was true. The galaxy had seen great powers rise and fall, but none had seen a species so fragile that it became unbreakable. And the more the council thought of this, the more they realized they were not just fighting Earth, they were fighting the future. On the front lines, alien warriors now moved with caution. They carried heavier weapons, thicker armor, and yet none of it made them safe for every step. They carried the weight of stories that haunted them. They remembered comrades dragged into tunnels never seen again, soldiers ambushed by shadows that moved like ghosts. They feared the sound of silence because silence meant the humans were. Near it was no longer just war. It was a hunt. And the hunters were not the Empire, but the very species they had once dismissed as weak. And in that shift, the balance of power began to tilt. Among the resistance leaders, whispers grew of something. Greater, they spoke not only of survival, but of unity. Humans from every land and every background who had once fought each other now fought as one. No flag, no border, no language divided them, only the fire of survival, and this terrified the aliens. More than any weapon, because they knew what unity could forge in time. An army of flesh that learned to fight together could become an empire of flesh that ruled without fear. And so the galaxy began to tremble, watching from afar some world sent. Spies who returned with chilling tales. They said the humans fight not for gold, not for power, not for empire, but for one another. And that kind of fight never ends. That kind of fight only grows. Others whispered that humanity was no longer fighting. To survive, they were fighting to become something greater. And when flesh seeks to become more than flesh, no power in the galaxy can stop it. The war spread into the stars. Resistance fighters captured alien transports, turned their own weapons against. Them pilots learned alien systems faster than the Empire believed possible. Each stolen ship became a symbol, a promise of what was to come, and the galaxy saw the first terrifying glimpse of a truth. It could not deny humanity would not remain in. The shadows humanity would rise, and when they rose, it would not be as victims, it would be as rulers. By the time the Council realized this, it was too late. The question that haunted their armies was no longer how to win against humans, but how long, before humans learned to win against everyone else. And so as the fires of war spread across Earth and into the stars, the galaxy understood the weight of the question whispered in the dark. Humans are only flesh. Then why do warriors tremble? And the silence that followed carried the answer, because flesh is not weakness. Flesh is will, and will cannot be broken. The war had reached its breaking point. The alien fleets that once circled Earth like vultures now drifted shattered and silent in orbit. Their proud banners burned, their great commanders fallen one by one. The armies that had called humanity weak had discovered a truth more terrifying than any weapon the humans could bleed, but they would never break on the surface. The ruins of cities had become fortresses. The craters of battles had become training grounds, and the very rubble of destruction became shields and walls for those who still fought. Every street was alive with whispers of victory, and even in the darkest nights the fires of resistance never died. Alien soldiers now walked with shadows in their eyes. Their armor still gleamed, their weapons still hummed, but their hearts no longer believed in the war. Each step into human territory felt like stepping into a graveyard, because everywhere they went, they found not surrender, but defiance. They could burn villages, and yet survivors would rise from the ashes. They could slaughter soldiers, and yet more would take their place. The humans fought with flesh, but also with spirit, and spirit could not be measured by numbers on a commander's screen. In the resistance camps, humans had begun to master the stolen ships of their enemies. They were no longer just running. They were striking. They used alien technology against the very empire that had once thought them prey, and with each victory the galaxy trembled. Spies returned with messages of fear, entire alien battalions refusing to fight, whispers spreading like wildfire that humans were cursed. Cursed not because of power. Cursed not because of weapons, but because no force in existence could make them stop fighting. The more they lost, the harder they fought, and the harder they fought, the more they won. Deep within the alien council chambers, silence hung heavy. The leaders who once demanded Earth's submission now avoided even speaking of humanity. Their greatest fleets had been broken, their warriors shaken, and their people whispering questions that no empire wished to answer. What if the humans are not the end of a war? What if they are the beginning of something greater? One elder spoke with a trembling voice. He said, "Flesh should not frighten steel, yet it does. And if this continues, steel will bow to flesh forever." His words sent ripples of unease because the council knew what he meant. Humanity had already won more than battles they had won: fear. On Earth, the people were no longer hiding in shadows. They were rising into the light. Whole cities declared themselves free zones guarded by fighters armed with stolen alien weapons. The humans did not wait for the enemy to come. They went after them. They hunted them through forests, through mountains, through space itself. For the first time in galactic history, the hunters had become the hunted, and those who once looked at Earth as a weak world now looked at it as the birth of a storm. Across distant worlds, alien races watched in silence. Some feared, others hoped, for they, too, had felt the cruelty of the Empire. And now they saw what humanity had done. They saw that a species of flesh had stood against the greatest war machine in the galaxy and not only survived but scarred it forever. They whispered among themselves what would happen when the humans left their world and turned their fire to the stars. What would happen when this species that fought for each other discovered that others, too, were waiting to be freed? The final battle came not with a roar, but with a silence above Earth, where the largest alien fleet once floated. Only fragments remained, burned metal drifting like ghosts. The last commander gave the order not to advance but to retreat, and when that order spread through the galaxy, it shattered the illusion of invincibility. The Empire that once ruled through terror now carried terror within itself, and the humans who had once been seen as prey now stood as predators. And so the question whispered in fear became the truth carved into history. Humans are only flesh. Then why do warriors tremble? The answer spread from world to world, because flesh is not weakness. Flesh is endurance. Flesh is rage. Flesh is hope, and when flesh unites, nothing can destroy it. The galaxy learned too late that the war for Earth was not just a war. It was the birth of a legend that would echo through every star system. Humans were only flesh, but they were also the fire that would never die.